5:30. The time has arrived. Gentlemen, please proceed.
Thank you. Taking charge, Link Step has basically said a city is 8 big ideas, and we're going to talk about 2 of them today. Economic opportunity and environmental quality, in that order. With respect to economic opportunity, if you'd hit the first slide, Michael, this is the first of 6 goals that are listed in taking charge. But the truth is, the first goal is almost always a big, broad idea. It's the big idea in economic opportunity. And the important thing to look at it from my perspective is that when we talk about economic opportunity, we're talking about a healthy, effective private sector. The public sector supports, but it's the private sector that creates economic opportunity, and we are assisting them as best we can. So, our goal, facilitate private sector expansion of business investment, job creation, technology innovation, and income growth. And that really quite summarizes the area. Of those that we want to start with are the topics of business recruitment and retention. And Mike Lang and Pat Haverty are here to talk about that.
Great. Thank you, Dave. Going to give you a little insight in our world of economic development. As you're aware, we have a contract with the Lincoln Partnership for Economic Development to be the central clearinghouse for all economic development and related information. We also coordinate very closely when our responses to businesses interested in the community, and also collaborating on facilitating expansion projects. Pat, who is the Vice President of Economic Development for LPED, does a fantastic job, good team. We've got a great relationship, and that's really what's helpful in making it work so well. We thought we would give you some idea of, the annual investment leads that we facilitate. And when I say facilitate, it could be in a variety of ways. Pat's team is very good at dealing with state incentives and coordinating with private utilities and other entities. While at the city, we oftentimes will coordinate permitting, plan review activities just to make sure that projects go very smoothly. At the end of the day, we want the business leaders that are currently here to view Lincoln as a very business-friendly, place that they feel comfortable with, and spread that word to their networks nationally. We've got a lot of terrific feedback from people from out of town, whether it be architects or businesses interested in our community, that that basically feel that our services are top shelf. Pat, would you like to add anything to that?
Yeah, I mean, we always get a lot of positive feedback from folks who have done projects here in regard to Mike's team does a great job. Mike's team does a great job.
I admire your ability to make an entrance. As a working actor, I appreciate the ability to get attention.
And that's 1 demerit each. Please continue.
Oh, that's fine. I wasn't sure if anyone was going to say anything there. And it's not just Mike working in hand with us. It's all the city staff, and Mike does a great job as liaison to the different city or entities, these utilities, et cetera. So it's a great relationship. Companies appreciate a relationship like that. So we want to make sure that we acknowledge that the city does, obviously invest in that, and we think it's a very important piece of what the city does, and in turn what we are doing too.
Yeah, and the city team, I can't say enough about them. It's very, very typical to get our utilities involved in projects. You'll notice on this graph that we have site visits. That red bar is actually businesses or real estate consultants that are searching locations for projects. And you can see a nice uptick there. We do have a site visit coming this week, and utilities are instrumental, both water and wastewater, particularly if it relates to a large volume user. And we coordinate very closely with city staff, whether it's public works or building and safety. Planning plays a role. The health department played a role in this lead. So it is really a team-wide effort. And so this gives you some sense of how many site visits we get per year. And 2017 was a very good year. We had a lot of people coming to the community, a lot of interest in Lincoln. You often hear of us hitting a lot of different lists, best places to work, best places to live, quality of life factors. And we'd like to think that some of that relates into, you know, increased interest in the area. 15 is a very, very good number, I think. So, here are the results from 2017. We tend to report out publicly reported projects, and so may not necessarily include all the investments that relate to proprietary information, but this at least puts it in some scale. You can see the 734 new jobs and over $70 million in capital investments. Local incentives are a critical part of this process, particularly tax increment financing. We show a lot of real estate consultants and business leaders, sites that are in, you know, on the periphery of the community. And we do have, you know, an EO in place that, you know, if we are going to be enabling TIF for a project, that they have to be a net exporter, or over 50% of their products or services need to come from outside Lancaster County, importing wealth to the community. But, you know, basically for, you know, utilities, site-related costs, things of that nature. So anytime we get a chance to defray costs, it's a good thing in our world, because it's these primary employers that help drive other sectors of the economy. The Fastforward Fund is another one that's got some utilization. Of course, that fund is limited to public utilities and other infrastructure. Really helped Duncan Aviation, Zoetis, the creation of a rail park out, you know, in the airport industrial area. That's something that we're glad, it's a finite source, but we're glad that we have it available, and we're very judicious in how we use it.
Do you know exactly how much money is left in that fund?
It's probably right around $5 million, but I can get you an exact dollar amount. And the impact fee refund is another tool that we promote. And basically, once again, it relates to primary employers or net exporters, and it's really dependent on the job creation and the number of jobs, payroll, and the capital investment in a project. And so if we get our arms around that level of detail and information, it's not a quick turnaround. Much like the state incentive programs, it's, you know, what you're doing is you're looking at a job attainment period and then a maintenance period as well. So, you know, it could be multiple or several years before they actually claim the refund, and it's very performance-based. And both Fastforward Fund and the impact fee refund are performance-based incentives. Quality of life matters. And, you know, when we have the visitors that come to our community to evaluate it as a place of business, it's one of those, I'm not going to call it rare occasions, but, you know, certainly we want to get their feedback on their perceptions and view of the community. What were your top 3 things that you liked about Lincoln? You know, these are some of, you know, some of the feedback that we're characterizing here in this slide. The overall livability. Sometimes the site location consultants come here for a couple days, even as long as 3 days from time to time. So they do get a chance to get some experience with Lincoln, and, you know, typically overall very positive. A vibrant downtown is another common one. Lincoln's got a very good, you know, walking downtown area. And, you know, the investments that we've made in the public infrastructure, the streetscape, you know, the artwork, the upkeep, just kind of the whole package, if you will, with the entertainment district, is viewed in a very positive light. Parks and trails and recreational opportunities are another one. We certainly chronicle that in our responses to these businesses interested in Lincoln. And they come out here and they find out for themselves. There's a large jogging community, for example, and they take advantage of the trails that go from downtown out to other places. Short commute times is a pretty common one. A lot of these real estate consultants come in from large, you know, urban metropolitan areas, and you know, this is one that often makes the list. Of course, cost of living and entertainment are big ones as well. Do you want to add anything to that, Pat?
Sure, and a lot of these things, obviously, the city is supporting to create or to enhance, and you know, so that you know, that's an important part of the relationship we have here. A companies are really this is a big deal for companies, and a lot of that is they're trying to recruit the millennial generation or retain the millennial generation, right? And so they're looking at your talent pipeline that's coming out of the university or the other colleges here in the community, but they also look at how are we going to keep these people here, and if we're going to employ them, how are they going to stay? A lot of these companies that we work on projects, they want to bring in a percentage of people from outside in their organization. And so you can imagine the quality of life as you look at a community. How does that show here in Lincoln that they'd be wanting to bring their employees here? So it is a huge issue. The Haymarket, the rail yard, that whole piece is when we bring companies here, they're really amazed. And there's a perception out there, and we all know it, about the flyover state, right? And we get companies that come here that have never been here. And we always say that if we can get someone physically here, we've got a really good chance at landing them, because I can't tell you how many companies are just amazed by what is available here, the rail yard, the Haymarket, the community as a whole. Safe, clean are things that we constantly hear. And so we love to try and get companies here. Mike mentioned the 15 site visits that we had, because we know that this community shows really well, and it's a great opportunity for us to try and land that project.
Roy, can I ask a question? Pat or Mike, when you come up with these categories, what is in the makeup of overall livability, and what are they factoring in for cost of living for a site selector?
You know, livability really is, it's a very general overarching term. You know, it deals with, you know, the built natural environment of a city, the economic prosperity, social stability, equity, educational opportunity. I mean, it's kind of like the whole package almost, if you will. And, you know, some of these other things on the list are just, you know, common themes that we see in the feedback that we get from people that visit our community as well. So, you know, this is just a short punch list, but certainly the factors are brought up, and we get good feedback in that way.
So the cost of living, our organization does it quarterly for, it's ACRA. I don't remember what that acronym stands for, but so it's a nationally published list. There's a huge list of prices of different items, and so we finished at about 93 to 94% of the average cost of living for the country. And so as you look at some of the communities that we compete against time to time, a town like Madison is actually pretty high. It's probably about 110 to 120% typically. So it's interesting to see some of those things, but companies do take a look at it. And part of that, it relates also to the cost of doing business here. While there's not a specific study that we do like the cost of living, you can look at a lot of those different factors, and it's also a big deal for them, for their employees, that you know, it's much cheaper to live here, especially if you look at housing.
Yeah, which relates right into marketing and attraction. You know, you see some of these large-scale requests for information that we have. You know, if they're going to have to recruit 400 or 500 people to a community, all of these factors matter, and cost of living is certainly one of them. Kind of shifting gears here a little bit. The Lincoln Partnership for Economic Development is launching, or has launched, a new website.
Just soft launched it, yeah.
Soft launched it. And, you know, when it gets right down to it with marketing and attraction projects or new business recruitment projects, a lot of the, I'll call it first community screening phase, is done over the internet. And it's important to have, you know, particular data sets online. And there's, you know, we have an association called the International Economic Development Association for our practice, and they publish data standards. If you're a real estate consultant, this is the type of information and format we would like you to have. You know, we try to create a turnkey, kind of one-stop website, if you will, that has not only that, but all the relevant incentive information, site and building database. There's a lot of features on it that we need to maintain and update. And, you know, so this is the latest and greatest version.
Want me to run through a little bit from over
Yeah,
here?
sure.
I can probably sit here and do it. So as Mike mentioned, really this is the first glimpse that people that are doing searches have an opportunity to look at the community. And site selection consultants, we see quite a few of those, but we also see a lot of company direct projects where companies are just coming on. We've had, I always call it stalker software, but we've got software that we pay for that actually can tell you who a company and the IP address and everything, who has been on your website. And so we see probably more so companies actually doing searches, and we see the pages kind of like Google, where you can go in and get that analytics. But so we know that there's a lot of companies that are out here looking at the website. We've got some really talented people in our office. Our folks actually designed this website, and so it's a much more modern, kind of sharper view than what we've had previously. I won't spend a lot of time here. I'm not sure why that page is not found there, but interesting. So part of what we have, and this is on every page, these are our major investors that we have here with the partnership. Let me see if we can go to another one here. Mike talked a little bit about demographics, and you'll see that all these are statistical information about the community. And so this piece here, we've got, we do have wage data for every job description that is in the Lincoln market. It's not all here, obviously. We've got a report here called Detailed Lincoln Data. It's like 80-some pages of more statistics than you ever wanted to know about Lincoln, which is done by Bureau of Business Research. We just give a little snapshot of some of this here. You look at salary by industries, you look at total wages and that sort of thing here. We update this every year. This data is actually about a year old. We're getting ready to put in the new data here. So we got salary by occupation, et cetera, here. And again, we've got some of the same look here. So we also do a lot of work with startups, and we recruit startups. So this is the page that actually links you to the startup website, which is Startup LNK, but it's also got some additional information, talks about that. We've also got, there's our Twitter feed for startup. This section here is just news events, and it's news about startups specifically. We move on. That needs to get out of my way.
You know, one of the things I think Pat's organization is really trying to do is to recruit startups to Lincoln. And that could be definitely of some value to moving forward in the future, is to create high growth opportunities locally.
Yeah, and we've, you know, you take a look at startups, and we've had conversation with several already this year, and some of them have ties to Nebraska. And so those folks not only bring new ideas, potential companies that can scale to the community, but they're also really good citizens here. So this is the starting of our talent side of what we do. And so we've got a whole section in here. If someone is thinking about moving to Lincoln, you've got, you can do some cost of living comparisons. That is a piece where you can look at different neighborhoods throughout the community by a company called Live By that was started here. And there's just a variety of information again. As you look at this menu, you've got live, work, learn, play. So if you're looking for a job, we've got links there. Talks about the different employers in the community, et cetera. And this is really just kind of our about us. It's got our team there. And we do get asked from time to time about folks or companies locally that want to invest with us. So we've got a section there on investing here with the partnership. So there's a lot of information on here. It's really the front door to the community for anyone that's interested in moving here. You can, especially the technology businesses, starting a technology business, or companies that are considering locating here. We just soft launched it Friday, I think, and so there's some tweaks we still need to do internally, but we think it's a really good, robust quality website to promote the community.
At one point, the vast majority, I think it was up to 90% of community searches were done online. So that kind of brings to light the importance of having a one-stop tool like this that people can go to. And last but not least is, one of the things I actually take a look at kind of in conjunction with our economic development effort, and I know you've seen business permitting or building and safety permitting activity, but I take a look and track the business permit valuations year over year. And you can see in 2017, we had an extremely strong year overall of permit valuations and a very strong year overall for commercial permit valuations. I went back to, early 2000s, and the 774 million appears to be a record, at least going back that far. So, we're trending definitely in the right and stronger direction. So overall, this is great news, for us. And, when I saw the numbers, last November, I figured, we were going to maybe hit a record, and then December came in, and then it was true. So something we should all be proud of. The level of economic activity on the building side of the house is very strong right now.
The one thing that I wanted to mention, I guess more than one thing, but as we looked at, why we're here talking to you folks today, and it looks like a goal is to, increase that investment in those leads and opportunities. I just want to talk for a little bit. We appreciate the investment that you make in economic development and the organization, that direct impact or direct investment back to the organization. Just kind of give you an idea of where we are in increasing leads and opportunities. Our staff will attend about 12 events or trade shows here in 2018. We're taking 4 business recruitment trips. We just got done with one in Seattle. We will go to California next month. We'll be in Chicago in June, and then Toronto in the fall. Some of those are set up so that through a consultant, and so we have an opportunity there to meet with about 15 to 20 businesses that have expressed an interest in relocating operations into Lincoln. As Mike said, we do have a goal of recruiting startups this year. We have a goal of recruiting 5 new startup companies into Lincoln. 2 of those trips will be taking our innovation team, and we'll be meeting with some startups in some of those areas as well. On the talent side, which is super important to all the companies as they look to grow in this community, we got a big trip coming up, South by Southwest in Austin here this weekend. I think they're actually leaving. And we may take the talent team on some of these other trips if there's an opportunity there. We've got the Inside Outside Innovation Summit that's coming up in May, and we'll use that as a recruitment tool on the startup side as well. And continue to promote Lincoln big picture through the efforts of the Chamber, the CVB. That's all important. We get the word out about how great Lincoln is.
Questions? All right, let's move on.
With the 17 projects, the slide that 17 closed projects, are those related to the leads? Are those related to just TIF projects? What does that mean?
So, some of those projects when we look at leads, take years. I'll give you a great example. Kawasaki, I came here in May 11th of 2011. May 14th of 2011, Kawasaki called me. They were thinking about doing this Boeing door project, which we just had the big ribbon cutting for last May, I think. 6 years it took. Right? Wow. So this is kind of a side story. I know I didn't answer your question, but almost all those projects have been through our lead process at one time or another. Some of them are publicly reported through Advantage incentives, and we haven't actually worked on those. But the majority of that 17, they have been in our project list 1 year or another through there. Some of them a couple years. Kawasaki's an outlier at 6.
Some get TIF in and some do not.
Okay.
It goes both ways.
And the ways you're trying to market Lincoln make a ton of sense. I was just curious, though, when you get feedback from people who choose not to come, what they tell you and what that how that might be relevant to the work that the city does to try and support your efforts.
So the biggest challenge that we have is workforce, above and beyond anything else. I'm having a hard time even thinking of number 2 here. You know, I mean, we had a company that was going to fill the Verizon building. There was a lease there, and at the end of the day, they were here 3 times, and at the end of the day, they said, we can't bring enough, you don't have enough people. We can't do this project. So that's our biggest challenge. The city does an amazing job with those quality of life things that we talked about, trails, parks. Public transit I don't think we mentioned public transit. That's an issue for companies, especially as they come from the coast. They don't understand the car issue we probably deal with, but they always ask about public transit. Where's it at? Does it come close to this location? Scheduling, all those things. So, I mean, I know the council supports that, and so that's greatly appreciated as well. So the quality of life things, I think the community's doing a great job with that. It's not something the council can jump up and fix, but the workforce challenge is something that we're spending a lot of time and resources on to try and help companies with.
Yeah, when we go out and survey businesses, it's interesting because one of the leading advantages to doing business in Lincoln is worker productivity. But on the flip side, one of the major weaknesses or disadvantages of doing business here is labor availability. So, you know, this is the kind of feedback that we routinely get from leading executives throughout the community. So, yeah.
So to address that, that's one of the reasons you're going to Austin. Maybe you should go to Fargo in January or something.
We've got some different ideas. I mean, and one of them, and we just got to figure out staff and resources for, right, is there's a huge military separation that's going on a regular basis.
Mm-hmm.
And those people are used to moving around,
Yeah.
right? So how do we connect with some of those people? A lot of great skill sets there, a lot of great work ethic there. So that's just another thing that
You get the unicameral to stop taxing military retirements.
Yeah.
I know it's a challenge.
You do.
Right?
Yeah, but we increased the contract amount for the Partnership for Economic Development. So one of the things they did was they hired a talent recruiter and a coordinator. And so they work directly with companies. There's an HR forum that's been created amongst the, HR executives through the community so they could brainstorm and, apply creative ways of trying to recruit talent into the community, which is very helpful. A lot more emphasis on workforce development than there has been in the past. Is that fair, Pat?
That is fair. Yep.
Yeah.
When you speak of talent, are you working with organizations like Gallup and Talent Plus, although they've got different elements, but still, like Talent Plus is all over the world.
Yeah.
Yet they also want to recruit for their headquarters here.
Right. And so the forum that Mike had mentioned, both Gallup and Talent Plus are there. It really started out as a big group of HR managers in the community. And there's a lot of brainstorming that goes on there about what's working best, whether that's Talent Plus, that's Gallup. And we're not by any stretch the HR experts, right? So we get the people around the table and help us help you is kind of the cheesy way we approach that. But that's what we're really trying to do. Pick their brains, what could work, let's see if that doesn't work, let's go out and do that, and see if we can have some success.
Do you have any data on people who've fallen out of the employment market? And we talk about our unemployed percentages, but I know your figures nationally of how many people have just left the marketplace. Do we have some of that in Lincoln that might help, saying, gee, we may have 2.8%, but we got another 2%, 3% that are...
Yeah, I don't have that data. I'm not sure where it is, but I think it does get collected. But what I've seen is where they say that this many people have stopped looking for a job or stopped filing for unemployment benefits. It's something we should probably take a look at. But we haven't been taking a look at
And it
that.
might help you overcome the availability.
Mhm.
Yeah.
All right. We're on time for the next.
Then let's move on.
Okay, thank you.
I'm going to come down there and use the computer.
Okay. That's like you're all set up.
All right. On your agenda, you'll see we want to talk about tax increment financing.
Is this enough time?
This is enough time.
Okay, I'm just making sure.
There'll be some time for questions. I'll cross-examine. You see us on a pretty regular basis bringing projects forward, and we are the applicant as the Urban Development Department. But the truth is, we're standing beside the developer because we're there because the developer wants to do something in Lincoln and build something, and they want to do it in an area that's been declared blighted and substandard, for which we get to use the constitutionally endorsed tool of tax increment financing. We have set for ourselves a standard, an indicator, that we want to make sure that there's a significant improvement in the tax valuation of what was there and then what comes there, what takes its place. This is our best way of explaining or seeing what we've done. It starts with the Beitler administration in 2007, but you'll see in 2013 that the light gray on the left-hand side, the little part, was the base valuation. That was the value of the land before the TIF project. And you'll see that it grows across all 4 of the years that are listed there. The black is the valuation growth. It requires 2 things for us to be able to complete this chart. First, we have to know the base value. That's easy to come by. And the second one is the project needs to be done and newly valued so that the assessors come in and see it. This is not all of the tax increment financing projects because there are a number of projects that are not completed. We've done, for example, recently approved the Lincoln Journal-Star area, but it's going to take 2 or 3 years before there'll be a number for the black column to the right. So this is a portion of what we've done. The important thing that you see there is the growth in valuation, and these are the percentages of that growth. Our internal indicator says we'd like to see at least a 500% jump in valuation. Well, on the ones that are in this chart, we've seen a total of a 960% growth. In other words, the building that takes the place of what's there now is almost 10 times more valuable than what was there before we began. And the payoff for that is twofold. One, it certainly has the community redevelopment goal of attacking blight and substandard conditions. And secondly, it grows the tax base. In the event you compare these 2 numbers on our 2017 and translate the difference, the growth from just the light gray up to the top of the black gray, that would be about $6.5 million of property taxes a year. When those projects come online and their taxes stop doing the TIF agreement and start paying for all of our public services, every year those projects that are listed will be producing $6.5 million a year. In 10 years it'll be $65 million or more from these. So we do grow the tax base. It doesn't mean that we want to ignore, however, what we think is the other goal, and we do it for redevelopment purposes, but we also think this is economic opportunity. When you take that kind of land in that situation and you replace it with that, it is more than simply removing a blighted and substandard condition. It also creates a sense of momentum and growth. It changes the skyline. So when we take environmentally troubled, isolated areas and it becomes the West Haymarket, it becomes an engine for other development. We have not explored, as Omaha does, the halo effect. There, they track growth in a surrounding area, about 300 feet from the project, to see if growth in that area is unchanged or if it ticks upwards. And they find that it does. We're not sure of their methodology. We don't do it ourselves. But when you go from this, to that, we think that's economic opportunity. And from this on North 27th to that. And from this, an unoccupied building to that, we think that winds up being growth. This is the last one that Councilwoman Lamb was at when it opened. We lost the tasty, darn it, but we did get 48th and Holdridge. So that's the tax increment financing story. We've had a change, and I talk to you about it in livable neighborhoods, where we moved Wynn into the livable neighborhoods area. We didn't replace Steve Worthman as the housing manager. We transferred from being the community development manager to becoming the livable neighborhoods manager. But what that means is that agenda will use a great deal of her time. If there is a budget implication on what I've just shown you, we have put in for a replacement for Wynn to keep doing what she was doing, which was managing the projects that we bring to you and confound your life with our work. But that is a budget implication here. I'm ready to move on to the infrastructure part of economic opportunity, unless you have a question.
I don't have one, Dave. A lot of people are concerned that we get into the maximization of TIF and just use it all over. You get the pour over TIF ideas and so forth. Whereas in earlier years, a decade or more ago, there would be the property getting on the tax rolls where it was actually going to the taxing entities sooner. Do you have any comments on that?
We did have perhaps a different arrangement than which projects came on a little earlier than, well, we did it rarely. We also did it in a fashion that was unique to Lincoln, and it was conservative, and it was so sufficiently conservative that doing business in Omaha compared to doing business in Lincoln was much better in Omaha than Lincoln. So the projects that you're kind of talking about are true, but we also got the reputation of saying we would take a 20% haircut in the resources. The city was sometimes behind the bonds, and so to protect ourselves, we held back resources. Those resources could then be used at the end of the project to move the timeline along. The difficulty was that people also said, yeah, it's not great to do business in Lincoln. It's much better to do it in Omaha. Same project, but there'll be a big difference in our bottom line because of the self-protective measures that Lincoln's taking. I will say this, I'm sure that you are out in the public in a way that I'm not, seeing and talking to people in a way that I don't. But I will say this, I do not hear that a great deal. You do, but I don't. I don't know. It's the difference between a council person who's the input for, public reaction. But we're in the same hearings together, John, and Richard Halverson comes, and Dick Esquivel comes, and Jane Kinsey comes, and the like, but it's a pretty small clutch of people. I haven't heard of, LIBA, or the Chamber of Commerce, or the organizations that I'm doing, raising that issue to me directly. What I hear on the rare times when I go to cocktail parties and have my Diet Coke is generally Lincoln's growing. I like the momentum. I like the skyline. It's interesting to see cranes. So I think we have different audiences that we're talking to.
Well, I think some of the concern, if I may just follow up here, William, some of the concern too is using some of that TIF for the adjacent, say, streets and roads. We're facing ongoing challenges there, and I know you get into negotiations with developers, and they're saying, gee, I just need all this but for, and not doing the project, but yet you've got adjacent streets and so forth that are really in poor shape, and so somehow balancing some of that and letting them realize, helping negotiate with them to the standard that
it would be helpful to tell the story, because we're doing that, John. We're not failing to do that. There's well over $1 million in the Lincoln Journal-Star project for P Street. There's money in that for the block that's next to Embassy Suites. That's not uncommon. You'll see when we bring you the plan amendments or the project areas that we quite commonly use the streets in the surrounding areas for, let's say, another block, for exactly the goal that you have. You will see, or you're about to see, I think, one of the projects that we've crossed the finish line on, but that they want to expand. And in the expansion of what they want to do, and we've re-designated it, we're going to go into an alley to make some repairs. We were at a city council meeting. We heard, can you do anything about the alleys? Well, when it came time to do that, we brought that topic up. You will find a significant portion of the resources in TIF being spent for streets, landscapes, and utilities.
There is.
So the sort of nature of Lincoln TIF has changed over time in an effort to make it more successful, and I think it's probably easy to argue that it's been pretty successful in recent last decade.
It's in the eye of the beholder,
Sure,
certainly.
well, your chart suggests it's been successful. Are your standards at all changing in how you evaluate TIF-worthy projects, in that downtown was blighted in the 70s, maybe, late 70s, the redevelopment plan? And there are folks who will say, doesn't look blighted in a lot of those areas anymore. Does the blighting period have a closure?
No.
It doesn't.
It can come to an end on this theory. There isn't in the Redevelopment Act a beginning and an ending. There's a beginning set of conditions. And by the way, it also says, and to prevent its return. So it doesn't have a closing date. The authority to create that power is certainly done at the state, but then it has to be endorsed locally, and we've done that. I was asked in a legislative hearing, can a city council end the TIF period? And the answer I gave them was, in my experience in law school, if you've given a power that a group has to use, they also have the power not to exercise that. Which means, although it doesn't say in the community redevelopment law, city councils are hereby authorized to end or revoke TIF status. It is a logical conclusion that I believe a court would reach, that having given you that power, you could choose not to exercise it. Which means, in answer to your question, if you want to extinguish a TIF district, I think this council has the power to do that. Should we move on to infrastructure?
Please do.
Another big piece of the puzzle, but let's take the area of parking to do that. Wayne, if you want to come up. And then following Wayne, I think we're going to do wastewater and high-speed internet. Do you want to operate the computer? All right. Wayne next door, our director of parking.
Well, good afternoon. So our role in economic opportunity is a support role. Obviously, it is, in our case, creating parking infrastructure for support of downtown businesses. Starting in 2007, you can see from this that our city system contained about 4,100 parking spaces in garages, another 300 or so in surface spaces, and about 2,300 on-street spaces. That remained constant through 2011, and in fact, it didn't begin to grow until 2012 with the Larson Building garage, which opened in 2012, and then the Lumberworks garage opening in 2014. By 2015, we were now approaching 8,000, or rather, just over 5,000, 5,300 spaces in garages, in city-owned garages, the 9 city-owned garages, and another 2,600 spaces in the JPA garages. And that remains what that is today. Our surface lot parking has grown from just over 300 to about 800 spaces. The on-street spaces have remained fairly consistent over time. We have added parking spaces at Nebraska Innovation Campus, but that has been the only significant area of growth over that period of time. In terms of the demand that has occurred over that period of time, in 2007, we were looking at about 4,097 monthly parkers. These are primarily downtown employees, although there are some residents included in those numbers. That meant that we were about 98% occupied with monthly parkers on a space per parker basis. By 2011, that had begun to grow to 5,300. It's continued to grow, and in 2017, we are at 6,523. That was as of August 31st of last year. So that shows about a 59% growth in the demand for monthly parking. We are now at, in monthly parking, at 122% of our available parking spaces. Industry best practices would indicate that about a 15% oversell would be optimal. We're at 22%. Very manageable. We're fortunate that we have downtown employers that their workforce works at hours that are easy for us to adapt to and maintain that 22% oversell in an efficient manner. But we are approaching that point where it is becoming somewhat more difficult. In terms of our transient parking, you're looking at numbers. 2007, we were parking about 750,000 transient sessions annually. At that time, the average duration of stay was about 2 hours. We are now at 1,060,000, almost 61,000, and the average duration of stay has grown to slightly more than 3 hours. So that's grown by about 42%. In order to accommodate that growth, unfortunately, we have had to take monthly parking spaces we ordinarily would have set aside for monthly parking, out of that, I've got it reversed, excuse me. In order to accommodate the monthly parking, we've had to take spaces that we would ordinarily have set aside for transient parking out of that arena, and we've moved it into monthly parking, which would explain why the growth from 2011, for example, to 2017 has not been as rapid as the monthly parking demand.
Wayne, does transient include the on-street meters, or is that just the garage?
No, it does not. This is just the garages, John. And those numbers are only for the city-owned garages. I've only included the JPA statistics to show the as we added garage spaces in 2013, 2014, when those garages opened. But we don't get any of the revenue from the JPA garages. That's all dedicated to repayment of their bonds. So we only include their existence. We don't really comment on whether or not they're productive.
One of the innovations that we've done for the transient parking is to create something called shopper zones. If you drive into a garage,
Yeah.
you'll find the most common and easily walkable, usable. We don't enforce it, we don't tow people, we don't do anything about it, but we ask them, could you give this space to people? And the reason we like that is it supports downtown retail, people who want to come down, and instead of just driving around endlessly, they can come in there. But the more employees, the fewer of those shopper zone stalls there are, which is why another garage, really strategically located, could hopefully move some of those employees to another location, and we could expand the shopper zone areas. That would be, I think, a very valuable thing to do for downtown, and we'd like to do that very much. So that's on our radar.
Just briefly.
Certainly.
The oversell, the 122% to 116%.
Yes.
I was a big fan of the surface lot under the underpass on the west side of Canopy Street. That recently went from, I don't know when it went, but now it's a monthly. Is that the issue you're talking about? That used to be a transient lot and now it's a monthly pass lot.
Yes, that is one of the things that we've had to do. That would be the West Depot lot that you're
Yes.
thinking of, yes. Actually, the equipment was removed in that lot to accommodate the BNSF employee parking. You probably noticed that we restriped underneath of the overpass and all of that, but there was an error by the contractor that's being rectified, so they haven't actually moved. So in effect, we prematurely removed the equipment there. We've shifted to digital monthly permits, but we also intend to, that is a temporary feature, and we're going to go back to transient parking in that lot, but we're doing it by installing multi-space parking meters. It'll be 2 pay stations that will manage that transient parking for that lot.
Thank you.
So that is temporary. But getting back to one of the things that Dave had mentioned was about the shopper zones. That is one of the things that came about with the consolidation of parking services into one organization. But the most important thing that happened at that point was the first hour free program. What we found over time with first hour free, as I had mentioned, in 2007, our duration of stay was approximately 2 hours. With first hour free that started in 2010, we now find that the duration of stay is a little over 3 hours. So in effect, it's revenue neutral. And that has been terrific from our standpoint, and it is something that is a tremendous benefit to the
I know
public.
it's revenue neutral to the parking system.
Yes.
But it's probably revenue positive to the merchants in the area, because we know the longer people spend shopping, the more money they spend.
You're absolutely right.
You've made that connection that we think is important. Infrastructure is economic opportunity. We are revenue neutral, but its net effect is to make business more successful in the area.
Without a doubt.
Anything else that we want to tell them?
Yes, we have one more
You
slide.
bet.
One thing that this slide does show is the growth in revenue over time. Again, 2007, we were at 6.5 million. We've grown that now at 2017 to about 14.5 million. But the goal of this is that next garage, the southeast quadrant garage. And one of the things that we put forward when we began planning for that is the idea that we would need to raise rates approximately 7% every 4 years. We had planned out 3 rate increases. First one was in 2016. You can see that there was a impact. The impact there between 2013 and 2016 is an increase of a little more than $3 million. We anticipate the next rate increase going into effect in 2020. That would be September 1st, 2020. We, holding all things equal, we expect that to increase about a little more than $1.5 million, and again, the same thing in 2024. These rate increases are necessary for us to be able to handle the debt service on the next garage. So
I'm sorry, can you tell me that rate of increase again?
approximately 7%.
Okay, thank you.
Questions?
Does that 2020 September 1st effective date require action in the 2018-20 budget then, or would that,
No.
I mean, will that be an item that, or is it out into the 2020-2022 budget?
I don't know. But in the past, the last time we did this, I don't recall that we had a budgeting kerfuffle prior to the action. My recollection was that, not knowing whether it would occur or not, we did it and then we adjusted our budgets accordingly. So if the past is any predictor of the future, you won't see it in 2018, 2019, but you will see that. You will all see it in 2020 when you're here, if you're not in another position.
Like civilian.
I was thinking of something else, but I guess that would be.
Three quick questions, Wayne.
Yes, sir.
On that increase in revenues, are those going directly to prepay some of the bonds, since you haven't always opened a garage in those periods?
Well, these are certainly estimates. Number one. Number two, the increase in revenue that we experienced in 2016 is going directly to building our property acquisition funds, so that we will be able to purchase the site for the next garage. The potential for the increases in 2020 and 2024. By 2020, we hope that construction of the garage will have commenced, and those bonds will be out there, that we'll have to start the debt service on those. 2024 certainly would be the case, and so all of that revenue would be dedicated to debt service.
Now, you're also having a declining debt services. Some of these get paid off.
We currently have 2 outstanding bond issues. Both of them defease in 2032. So there will be a number of years of overlap between the bond issues.
We did a couple of refinancings. So instead of a separate bond for each garage, at appropriate times when interest rates were low, we refinanced. So you really have, it's like you have 2 bonds for the entire system. So we're not going to get each garage coming off those. We got a significant benefit when we did that. But we're not gonna get the phenomenon of individual bonds for individual garages.
That's true, and we do currently have, our current debt service is, the debt amount's about 26 million, and the annual debt service is 2.4 million, and that continues out stable until 2032.
I also noticed that apparently recently you changed some meter times. I know I've seen some in the Haymarket.
That's correct.
Years ago, they were 2 hours, and then we got them changed to 90 minutes, so it would help facilitate having lunch or an hour appointment with an attorney or whomever, so they'd get some overlap.
Mhm.
But now you've gone back to 2 hour, and the problem we have with 2 hour is employees would plug in.
Well, and that is something that we continue to monitor, but our internal information shows that we're getting greater usage out of the 2-hour time limits. We eliminated the 10-minute meter. For the most part, we're phasing them out. We didn't just yank them all out. And the same thing holds true for the 1 hour. 1 hour were too close to campus, and we were not getting the full benefit from the demand in those areas. And the same thing holds true in the downtown core. We were looking at 90-minute meters, for example, around the Marcus theaters in many areas. And that was designed, obviously, to have theater goers not using those spaces. But we did convert many of those to 2 hours, and we'll continue to monitor them for usage. But I don't think that it's increased the usage of them, and I don't think that we're seeing much in the way of theater goers that are abusing the time limits.
Do you think employees are using those versus doing off-street?
I don't. I think that employees are using the ones that you see that aren't paid for. That doesn't matter what the time limit is. Our biggest difficulty is not during the day with employees utilizing them. It is the last 2 hours in the evening between 4 and 6 when employees of the various restaurants and bars particularly come in. It doesn't matter what part of downtown, and they're beginning their shift. They come in at 4 o'clock. They pay for the last 2 hours, but then never move after that, and monopolize those parking spaces up through the dinner hour, which would, particularly in the Haymarket, would be one area that would have a negative impact. That definitely adds to the perception that when someone comes down for dinner at 6:37, that there's no on-street parking. That is a problem that we're working to address.
Are you trying to eliminate all of the 90-minute, or is this?
No, we won't eliminate all. We're just working with for example, our license plate recognition equipment in monitoring the various areas around town and trying to determine the most effective mix of time limits.
I'd ask if you reconsider some of those going to 2 hour, because again, that was where we had to get employees out, and the 90-minute really, it worked well.
Okay. Well, we'll certainly continue to monitor. Go ahead.
Any rough estimate on the cost of that new parking garage for the southeast quadrant? I know property acquisition will.
Well, we have net of property acquisition, since we have no idea right now what that might cost. We are looking for a 700 space garage at a minimum, and we are looking at our consultant in looking at our potential desires for retail space on the first floor, for example, that type of thing, has told us that they believe the construction costs would come in at just over $30,000 a parking space. So we would be looking at construction costs of about $21 million on a garage that size, with the type of street front that we would want.
David, just real quick, on that matter, you know, the Latitude, for example, the student housing there south of Goals, if you look, they've had some real challenges getting retail in there, even a sandwich shop. And so they're just parking. If you look behind the glass, their cars parked there on the first floor. You know, we've had the downtown standards change and encouraging facilities to have first floor retail. But it seems like a challenge that, is there any consideration of revising that and maybe allowing some of that so that you know, it's not as costly to have?
I'm not aware of that agenda.
Because if you look
It might
around-
exist, but it hasn't, I haven't been in a meeting when that kind of a topic's been talked
Have you been
about.
monitoring the fact that it's so difficult to lease that first floor space?
It is, and we wish them the best, and so far they haven't found a home. There was a sandwich shop that didn't last long. But we've done our half of the equation, and they're working hard to make their half work.
John, I can address that. It's when those landlords sit, partner, and do the construction, it's very difficult to attract any retail there because the developers need to make their costs, and the costs that they would like to charge a potential retailer is still pretty exorbitant. And it's hard for those retailers to be successful.
I can appreciate
And I'm
that.
just not talking grocery retailers, just any retailer.
And I don't disagree with that, it's just that if we're forcing them to have it empty, that's even more expensive yet, because they're caught between a rock and a hard place there. They can't make it parking, or maybe do some lesser amount of the retail and capture some of that.
Well, I would say that from the parking industry perspective, it is less important to me that it be a retail operation in that storefront. While I'm certainly always up for another Jimmy John's, it doesn't necessarily have to be something along that line. We are really talking more about having active space. So it doesn't make any difference from my perspective whether it's a government office or whether it is any other type of retail. As long as people are going in and out, people are visiting that block in the downtown neighborhood, and that the street is active. Now that's just from my particular perspective. I'm sure there are all sorts of other design standards that we'll have to meet.
I interpreted your question to be about downtown design standards, Sean. I may have misunderstood.
That was part of it, because
I'm
that
sorry.
dictates having retail on it. And retail really has often become, as Carl was just noting, and Wayne, it's a burger joint.
The design standards do not refer to use. They do refer to transparency, windows fronting onto the block, and building styles. So in the downtown design standards, the use of the building isn't critical. It is how the building is constructed and done. In the event the developer came to us and said, we can't make this work, we'd like to have an adjustment, we'd listen to that. On the other hand, it would come back to you all, because it would be a change of a redevelopment agreement if that happened.
So you're saying that.
By the way, my experience is exactly what's happening, which is that in a mix of any set of topics, if parking's one of them, it'll take out everything else. Well, then let's move on infrastructure. And Donna, come on up. You get to seize control of the computer and the PowerPoint.
First, I gotta hand a map out. The one that's in there, awfully hard to read. Well, that's bigger. Yeah.
Good afternoon, council members. I'm Donna Garden, Assistant Director of Public Works and Utilities, here to talk about the growth of Lincoln. And one of the goals in the Taking Charge is to provide adequate and available infrastructure for new growth. And as you heard Mike and Pat talking about, we at the utilities area try to work with the developers that come in to make sure that we do have adequate utilities available for any project like that would provide economic opportunity. We certainly don't want to slow this down. Lincoln's growing and we want to continue to move forward. What I can tell you is that it is growing and we have an awful lot of capital that we will be spending in the next 2 years on new growth infrastructure. We look back at the 2 years we're in right now. Lincoln Water System has implemented the new well. You can see that going up on the east side of the Platte right now. We've got our water main replacement going full bore. We're at about 7 miles per year like we had planned to be. And we have a new pump station at Yankee Hill that's being built right now. Some very big projects for the Lincoln Water System. Well, it's wastewater's turn. Wastewater Division over the next 2 to 3 years will spend over $70 million in capital improvements alone to meet the growing needs of our city. We're going to be stretching our limits in wastewater and attempting to keep those rate increases at no more than the cost of construction inflation. We'll also probably have to maximize our borrowing during that time period in order to keep and keep it in a good frame so that we can still keep our great bond rating. I passed out a map to everyone there in terms of where our growth is occurring in wastewater. And if you look at that map, you can see that there are some very big projects moving forward. Particularly of note is the Stevens Creek Trunk Project on the east side of the map, which extends quite a long ways from Holdridge all the way down to Van Dorn. That opens up, for that area that's shown there, it opens up a very large area in red that's available right away. But if you look at the whole area, it includes that pink area also. So that area of town will be opened up for future growth. We also have, that project is $15.5 million. We do have the bids on that project now. Southwest Village, which is on the southwest side of the city, you'll see there connects an area that had started to grow at one time, but we have activity from developers and that it will continue to grow now. That one is about a $2.95 million project. And one of them that was appropriated actually in a previous budget was the Beals Slough. It actually doubles the size of the Beals Slough trunk sewer that runs through this kind of central part of town along Highway 2. And that provides collection for all of the southeastern part of the city where that's growing very rapidly right now. And we want to make sure that we don't have any problems with that. And it was designated to be doubled in size in that area. And of course, once we start talking about collecting more material through the sewer system, we're also talking about expansions and growth at the treatment plants themselves. At Northeast, which will now have all of the Stevens Creek area, we are going to need some additional work on our biosolids processing. That's a big project in this budget. And we're looking down the road in the 2020s, timeframe mid-2020s, for a future expansion of Teresa Street Water Resource Recovery Facility as well. And of course, this year, the other project that we have coming up in this next biennium, and also as part of this biennium, is the biogas to vehicle fuel project at Teresa Street. We also yearly designate a CIP project called Wastewater Construction for New Growth. This is number 0566 in our CIP that you're going to be seeing here soon. And we usually seek appropriation of about $1 million per year in order to look for apply to projects that we don't know about at the time of the CIP. New developers coming in, growth, that things that Mike talked about when we have opportunities that come into town to provide utilities. We normally do this and we have these funds available for those unknown projects at that time. But these funds for the next biennium, the next 2 years, are entirely consumed by the CIP projects that we've already designated. So we don't have that fund available for this 2-year time frame. And these are big projects. So Stevens Creek in particular, that picture you're seeing right there, those are people standing on that pipe, and that's a very, very big pipe. They're not quick or they're not easy. Stevens Creek's constructed with 54-inch pipe. There's 8,900 linear feet of it, and it reduces down to about a 36-inch pipe in a sub-basin, and that is 13,700 linear feet. So they're very, very big projects. It also opens up all that new area I talked about before. If you look at that map again and you see the area over on the eastern side, the red area for Stevens Creek there, that will actually open up 3,500 dwelling units, about 1,170 acres of land. But that installation of pipe that runs down the eastern portion will also open up that pink area, which is the next tier priority C, I'm sorry, tier 1 priority C, which will more than double that area. So there's a lot of potential there. Southwest Village opens up 800 acres and about 2,400 dwelling units. So how do we pay for this? That's the big question. And in all of our utilities, it's basically rates that support not only all of our operating budget, but it also supports our capital improvement program. And, of course, it covers any debt that we take out. And that debt is based as revenue bonds. It uses our rate revenues to support that debt. So we are very careful about how we take out debt. And we do a model each year to make sure that we meet a certain guidelines. But we took a look back at our annual increases since 1978. And if you do an average over that time period to what they are today, it would average out to be about a 5% annual increase. And it also, construction inflation, we're seeing about a 5% annual increase too. And we think that's a nice, consistent way moving forward to maintain what we need to have put in place for this next biennium for our capital improvement. as well as meeting our needs long into the future. So we may be a little bit cash flow short in terms of, I shouldn't say short, but tight the next 2 years. This 5% increase will meet that, and we should be able to carry forward. And then after we get out of this period of intense capital construction, we should be in very good shape. We will also look at revenue bonds. We will probably need to do some additional revenue bonds in the next 2 years, and we'll have that report when we talk about the budget moving forward. We have an excellent bond rating in our wastewater program, as we do in our water program, but there is a limit to how much we can borrow, and we're very careful in watching what that is. Our basic framework that we try to work through all the time is to have 180 days cash on hand and a debt service ratio over 2. So with the rates at 5% and issuance of debt, we can achieve the projects that we have in our CIP for the next 2 years. We'll be a little restricted on cash flow temporarily, but consistent moderate rate increases will allow future growth over time. And if there are any questions?
How much steel is used in some of your infrastructure projects? Is it pretty much just concrete pipes and things like that, and not a reliance?
The mains are concrete pipe, the bigger ones. As they get smaller, we end up going to PVC pipe. So.
PVC, okay.
And if we were going to move on to high-speed internet, I think
Sorry.
One more question.
Are you talking about water and environmental quality later in this presentation? Got it.
Yeah. I'm up twice.
Okay.
we're running a little behind, but David is succinct, I'm sure.
He's high speed.
High speed, low drag.
All right.
Keep this up and this moves all around.
This is the same map.
We're on page 23.
Based it out that way, it's not the largest or most easy to read map that I have ever produced. Yes.
Big maps, okay. What we're gonna do?
Thank you for giving me a few minutes to speak. I know you guys have a busy schedule today. I'm not going to talk about watershed or flood management or anything like that. There we go. It's funny. 2012 is when we started this project. Construction of the arena, construction of the rail yard. Fast forward to today, and the map before you, the map on the screen, shows that we are 68% complete with the entire city. It's roughly 70,000 homes passed with fiber. And with good weather and good construction, we will be almost complete this year with the entire city. It's a lot of the credit goes to people who are not here. Our permitting group, our inspection group, development services, planning have partnered with us on plan review software to help expedite the entire process. It's been a great, exciting trip. The benchmark that we're reporting on for Linkstat is average speed in Lincoln of 50 megabits a second download. There's a possibility that that benchmark is too low. We've been working with the Cable and Telecommunication Advisory Board to set up the testing software and a website for people to report their speed around the city. And then this weekend, Allo actually announced that their minimum speed offering went from 100 to 300. So we're going to, about mid-year, roll out the test website for people to log in and test their speed and report what they're paying. And then that will be reported to the Telecom Advisory Board. And then as the project is complete, we will see the impact that this project has had on our community. One of the things we like to talk about a little bit is the budget. So starting in 2014, which was our first full year of revenues from leases, we were about $200,000 of expense and $200,000 of revenue. We were about a break-even proposition. And then At the beginning of this project in 2016, our expenses went up above our revenues. Right now, as of February of this year, we've actually crossed back over into our cash flow is positive, exceeds our expenses right now, and over the next 2 years, we expect it to significantly exceed our expenses.
When you say revenues, is that revenues to the city versus what's that?
That's
mean?
revenue for the city. That's lease payments for conduit, that's our infrastructure payments from ALLO, that's our small cell agreements. And this is included in this, this package you're seeing here is the broadband infrastructure fund.
And what were the expenses? What types of things was the city doing versus what ALLO or Spectrum and others were doing?
So in this fund, you're paying 90% of my salary, and you're paying for.
You're paying too much then.
Well, I agree. Two.
Good to know.
2 inspectors and 2 locators. That's what we're paying for out of this fund. Vehicles, locating equipment, those types of things. We're also paying for a $600,000 CIP, which is extending conduit. You go to the map in front of you, all of the dark lines on the major arterial streets are the city conduit system, and the smaller lines that go into the residential, that is the distribution network for ALLO. And this map was updated last week, so this is very current. So we maintain about 480 miles now of public conduit, and we expand that conduit system in other areas, specifically areas where, without a business case, other people would not expend money to put in conduit. The best example I have is in front of the cemetery on O Street, roughly 40th and O. So there's a mile section in there, and they're a very small amount of businesses, but it connects from 27th and O to 40th and O, which are big areas of economic development activity. So the city put in the 6-pack conduit in front of the cemetery to cover that cost, to help private businesses get through that area at a low cost.
You know, Wyuka is now advertising they're connected eternally to your loved ones.
That's my next business line.
Is there more?
Wi-Fi in your capitals. So in front of Bourbon Theater, this is our first small cell. It is actually installed. The safety fence is gone. The interesting thing about this small cell, during testing on my phone, I received 200 megabits a second. There's also in front of the Downtown Lincoln Association, there's the frame shop across the street. You can see the next one going in right now. Currently we have 89 of these under permit and moving forward with construction. We expect that number to rise significantly over the next few years. And lastly, what are we using this infrastructure for? The Smart Gigabit Communities Initiative, where we're partnering with Fuse and the university to develop gigabit applications. We were awarded that project about 3 months ago. InPower, which is the middle project, which would create a network of wireless, advanced wireless research antennas around the community and connected across the state. And then most recently, we've been asked by the National Science Foundation and US Ignite to submit a joint application on public safety data using this infrastructure. We don't come in and often report. We try to keep it under the radar, but I think we're being very successful.
We have 10 minutes between now and the directors' meeting, and we have one more topic, but you may have another
Proceed.
Yeah, just ask real quick. David, you said we're at 68%. You're talking about the city's conduit part of the program?
I'm talking the entire city is 68% covered. The gaps you see, northeast Lincoln and basically south of downtown, those areas are very difficult for us to construct. We're working through some different engineering models to get those constructed. Those will be constructed this year.
Thanks.
Next topic.
Last one, yeah, it is the last topic of the day. Stormwater funding.
I think we get plenty of stormwater, we shouldn't have to pay for it, right?
Page 17.
Okay, 10 minutes, we can do this.
17.
All right, I want to talk today about Watershed Funding. This is part, again, of the taking charge indicators and goals is to maintain and improve stormwater quality, and big one, to minimize flood hazards. The city does it in a number of ways, and it has basically 4 parts to it. We have a regulation standpoint where we have a permit. We have the infamous MS4 permit, or the Municipal Separate Storm Sewer System permit under the Clean Water Act. And this permit actually holds us to a program that we have here. We did have an audit from EPA about 1.5 years ago, and they found a number of potential problems with our program. So we have worked very hard in the last 2 years to make sure we've cleaned some of those up. But one of them had to do with just not being able to deal with some of the maintenance in our system. We had to cut the maintenance crews, I think, about 3 budget cycles ago, and we have not refilled those positions since that point. But in terms, we've got the regulation standpoint, we have the maintenance, which is, that does all of the work going out, cleaning out those storm sewers, making sure they're in good condition. And of course, we have the capital improvement program in our stormwater program, which is funded by GO bonds. Basically, the permitting side of the house keeps up with public education. We have our erosion and sediment control program, which is our construction stormwater program. Our folks go out and have to do, according to the permit, inspections of construction sites. We have to permit those construction sites and make sure we don't have mud going into the streets. We also do pond inspections, and we passed the ordinance that people have to have those types of post-construction controls on their development sites now, which means there's probably more ponds that will be coming up in the future. We do conservation easement management and post-construction standards. Other aspects of what we do with watershed management, we have watershed master planning. We've done almost the entire city now, where there's a list of projects that are master planned moving forward, so that we know what priority we put those in for our general obligation bonds going forward. We have floodplain management, which is very important. All of that aspect goes into our community rating system rating, which is very good, and keeps our flood insurance premiums 25% lower than most of the country. We also do, and a lot of you have been involved with, drainage issues in development projects. We do reviews of all of the initial grading plans for the developments that go around the city. And we try to make sure that we've got adequate drainage in those areas so that we alleviate those issues after construction. And of course, then the capital improvement projects that you see on the general obligation bonds, number of big ones, 56th and Morton is going in right now. We'll be looking at a number of them around the city in accordance with our master plan. I think Irvingdale Park's getting ready to begin here shortly. And finally, a big piece of our program is the actual maintenance of our system. We have crews that go out and do the cleaning of those inlets, and we also have construction to improve them if something should happen to them or if they get broken. They're out there making sure our system is maintained. Just like our water and wastewater, we have to do this type of work with our storm sewers as well. Our current funding is this. We have about $2.025 million in general funds. That includes payment for personnel in both management and the drainage program. And then we had a stormwater grant that was provided to us by the Nebraska legislature a number of years ago when the stormwater program began. And basically that was to help all of those municipalities that had to fall into this MS4 permitting program and provide them with a grant that would fund part of this unfunded mandate from the federal government. So this program, this stormwater grant was put into effect. It's been cut over the years, but last year it was cut officially. It is completely gone. So we've lost the $375,000 in funding from that. The GO bonds, of course, are available to us as we need for capital improvements moving forward. And we are probably looking at one of those coming up here in the future. And again, the Nebraska legislature eliminated the stormwater grant funding, and it is somewhat uncertain. We've been very lucky with the GO bonds, and I may be not lucky because they're needed. These are needed projects across town. I think people recognize that, but we are never certain that that funding will come through. And we always hope that the public sees the value in the projects, but it is uncertain for us moving forward with the capital improvement program. And having quite a bit of the operations of the stormwater program being funded from general funds is probably not a great way to fund that program either. So, how do we make up the shortfall? How do we ensure funding for this program moving forward? This is a required program. It is required by to be in compliance with the Clean Water Act on a state and federal level. We can't reduce our program elements that we have included in it, and basically it's just a program. It talks about how many people we have, what are the activities we do, and we have to maintain that. Reducing or eliminating that type of part of the program is actually called backsliding under regulatory verbiage, and they can make us do more than we actually are doing now if we go through a backsliding event. The grant funded basically the regulatory part of the program because that's what it was initially established for. We have to maintain our high CRS rating. That rating is very important to a lot of people in this town that have had reductions in their flood insurance premiums, and we certainly don't want to see that go the other way. We know the importance of reviewing developers' plans. We've seen issues with some of them, and we've caught them, and we've managed to make changes in those areas, and we have to keep going forward with that too. And of course, we absolutely all want our system to work. And we put it in the ground. There's some pretty big pipes that go in the ground to handle storm water, and we have those inlets that have to be kept clean and working. Otherwise, we're not going to prevent the flooding that they're there to do. So this next budget cycle, this will be one of the issues we will have to deal with, is to how to make up the funding for this program. And with that, I'm done.
I would say this, while we're 2 minutes shy, there was a topic that didn't get on this agenda that Shavana prepared for, which was environmental health. I'm not sure what the chair wants to do.
Let's jump in there. Let's do it.
Do it now and then move on. Got it.
All right, well, I can wrap this up in 5 minutes.
All right.
Thank you for the second opportunity. So we have environmental public health, and it is the branch of public health that focuses on the interrelationships between people and their environment, protects and promotes human health and well-being, and fosters healthy and safe communities. And as a fundamental component of a comprehensive public health system, environmental health works to advance policies and programs to reduce chemical and other environmental exposures in air, water, soil, and food to protect residents and provide our community with healthier environments. The health department staff accomplish this through educating and training thousands of people in food safety and child care health, providing consultative assistance, conducting inspections. We issue permits. We investigate hundreds of complaints. We respond to hazardous material spills, investigating and stopping disease outbreaks involving regulated businesses on advisory committees. We coordinate volunteers and assisting neighborhood associations with cleanups and conducting hazardous waste collections for households and small businesses. And so here's just a list of those programs that we offer and a breakdown in how they're supported and funded. So with our Hazardous Waste Materials Collection Center, it's only been open for 5 months. The center is open twice per month, and it serves almost 200 customers. And we will ramp up the number of appointments and expect to serve about 100 households per month this summer. For fiscal year 19 and fiscal year 20, we plan to ramp up collections by expanding the hours or days of operation by 50%. And that will increase the number of residents we can serve to about 150 to 200 per month. We will also continue to offer our highly efficient mobile collections in the southern half of Lincoln and Lancaster County. And last year, the average mobile collection served 340 people in 4 hours and collected about 9,500 pounds of hazardous waste. And the new center also offers hazardous waste collection services for qualifying small businesses, nonprofit organizations, and government units twice per year. And we coordinate the collections, but the participating businesses pay all of their own disposal costs. And we hope to double these collections to 4 times per year in fiscal year 19 and fiscal year 20. So in this budget, we are proposing to do this, we'll need an additional FTE, but we also know that it will be supported primarily. It's no city general fund impact, it'll be fee funded. And the related link stat goal is to divert 100,000 pounds of hazardous waste from the landfill, and this collection center will help us to do that. Our second kind of budget implication is on our air program. And so our Title V Clean Air Fund is completely fee supported, but the major funding source for this fund will decline abruptly. And so new funding and reductions in costs are needed.
As early as fiscal year 21 or 22, emissions from MPPD will drop due to changing their fuel source from hydrogen to coal. And so we are looking at both cost-saving measures and revenue options. And so this budget does include a request to transfer 1.5 FTE from the Title V Clean Air Program to the Health Fund. But again, we're not adding any new staff. It's just a transfer of fees, and it will be mostly fee-funded. And this, I'm sorry, the link stat goal that this is attached to is maintaining our good air quality with existing staffing levels.
I think setting a standard for the rest of the presenters, don't you think?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
She would have won the,
Jet ski.
Well, I figured you already heard me talk for almost 2 hours the last time, so.
It was high-speed internet without the internet.
Yes.
Okay, couple of questions.
Yes, sir.
First of all, we've had problems in the past with our neighbors to the south in Kansas, dumping smoke on our city. Any conversations going on with the state and Kansas officials to
Yes,
somehow
actually, we just
reduce?
had a meeting, I think it was last Friday or maybe the Friday before, with Kansas, with the state. We were participants. The mayor's office was part of that discussion. Douglas County was part of that discussion. And we are also actually proposing to place a monitor down at the Homestead National Park, but then also Kansas will be placing 3 monitors along the Nebraska-Kansas border, as well as NDQ is placing a monitor in Beatrice. And so we are definitely in talks of how we can get some data, but also some lead time on the smoke in there. They've been working with the ranchers down there to maybe do some alternate burning, so that's not all occurring. So I think as we continue to discuss and come out with a plan, I think we'll have more information on that to come.
Okay, thank you. And then there was one other question, if you can. Is really interesting, I think, with Donna and your presentation, and then also from the health department, what happened in 2015 when all these things came together, where we had flooding, which caused a problem with our sewage system, which then created a health problem. So it's just interesting to see how these systems connect, and kudos for putting all 3 of these topics together today, because you see how that really does work.
We do.
okay, Larry.
I'm glad you're here, and I don't know if someone from Parks and Rec is here, but we received a contact from a constituent who's concerned about the toxicity of chemicals associated with treating for ash borer. And so while we are still in these early stages of developing our plan for emerald ash borer, I'm going to forward that to you all. It's way above my pay grade in terms of understanding the chemicals and their effects, but it sounds like there are some other potential options that have been used in other communities. I just would love to get some evaluation of that before we proceed to treat, although that has been our sort of, oh, there you are.
Have you seen all that stuff, Lynn?
Yeah.
I have, and, and we were in the process of evaluating it, and the Emerald Ash Borer Response and Recovery Plan will go to the Clean Forestry Advisory Board next Tuesday for review and recommendation. If they recommend it, we will share that information with them as well. And if they make the recommendation forward to the council, we anticipate that will be before the council probably in early April, and we'll make sure that we have good information about the imidacloprid chemical that is being proposed, or is typically being used in other options.
Okay, thank you. And then one other thing, I know the indicators in LinkStat for water quality look specifically at atrazine, because that's been a problem, arsenic because of the local nature of that problem, and then coliform bacteria. Is there any more general water quality measure that ought to be included, or are we just limiting to those 3 basic measures? I don't know if it's, I think it's a question for Donna, perhaps.
And as not included as part of those indicators, but certainly something that we're doing extra monitoring for is
Soon.
nitrates.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
we're just keeping an eye on that in the river basin. So that it is an indicator right now in taking charge or LinkStat, but it may be something we want to consider in the future.
And Donna, we have been under the federal standard, all the ones that
Oh, absolutely.
Counselor Gaylor.
Oh, yes, we haven't
Yeah.
exceeded any of the standards.
Right,
underneath
I
the
just
ones
wondered
we-
how you chose those three, and if there are others, if there should be others included, or.
That's the one I would be thinking of for future
Okay,
monitoring.
I think we're done, but we're just taking in, some people want to take a break, apparently up here.
Yeah.
We've got a whole bunch of staff waiting, so I'll give a 5-minute break, and
All right.
then we'll go into a lightning round.
Oh.
Thank you.
Thank you.